There's a lot of options when it comes to video games for the morbidly curious. Always plenty of mileage in horror games or gory action games, but if you want a unique shot of creepiness, you gotta check out the unassuming games. You should never judge the contents of a video game by merely using the box it comes in or the brief description on Steam. Clearly you've got to explain what your game is about, but there's no reason for whoever writes this to go too far. Nowadays I feel like we've forgotten what it means to be genuinely surprised, so when a game strings it all together in such a way where its true nature becomes more obvious, I feel like appreciation should be given. I mean, there's lots of moody, creepy games out there, but you shouldn't underestimate the value of keeping the darker material hidden behind something more cheerful. Given the topic and how valued multi-layered games are, some of these aren't quite as surprisingly dark as they once were, but it'd only be fair if I took them for what they were when they came out. They're all good games, plenty of value for money. Or more like, shock value for money. Oh, I'll get my coat. Some surprises are harder to keep than others. If you're sitting on a game that flips expectation on its head to reveal a far darker core, the temptation is there to spill the beans to turn their heads immediately, rather than wait for a slow trickle of people who might want to play the game now they know what it's all about. That was part of the problem with Pony Island, an indie game released on Steam early this year that may have the exterior of a cheerful pony platform game, but according to the description on Steam is simply disguising something far more sinister. Don't ruin the surprise. It's very hard to approach Pony Island from the angle that it was meant for, since it's virtually impossible to avoid spoilers, but when I first played it, I had the benefit of receiving it as a gift. When I first booted it up, I had literally no knowledge of what the game was about, and that helped quite a lot. Pony Island is less a game about helping ponies jump over hurdles and more about a game where you play Pony Island. I've always been a fan of meta-narratives, and when you're thrust into a world where you have to continuously play a possessed arcade cabinet that's trying to claim your soul, and attempt everything to fight back against this demonic force, somehow this sits better with me than if the game was as one-dimensional as you might think from the title. On the one hand, naming a game Pony Island almost invites skepticism that there has to be something more going on in the background, but on the other hand, I've seen some very one-note greenlit games over the past year or so. Certainly a lot more thought put into this one. Associating ponies with psychological horror is a hard place to move on from. The source of where the surprisingly eerie game comes from is quite important. Clearly you're going to be caught off guard in a bigger way with a creepy game from a traditionally safe franchise than from one that cranks out the horror games. It's the power of expectation, really. Nothing can prepare you for when Mario goes off the deep end and explores some themes that are significantly more complicated than go save your girlfriend from a lizard. Though maybe you get a decent amount of warning with Super Paper Mario, since the Mario RPGs tend to fiddle around with more interesting motifs, but this game takes the bar up a ladder and leaves it on a roof somewhere. The Mario RPGs always had a warped sense of humour that threw metaphors around like they were a waning commodity, but Super Paper Mario practically does away with the subtlety. And while that might sound like a bad thing, what it's replaced by is physical occurrences. Instead of maybe dying, you're straight up killed and sent to this game's version of hell. Bad guys don't talk about destroying the world if they get their way. The Sammer's Kingdom is there 1 minute and then reduced to a lifeless void the next. Super Paper Mario refuses to pull punches or downplay some of its events, and yet all this time, you're still playing as a character you're familiar with as you journey through this increasingly darkening world. Probably should go back to rescuing Peach from Bowser. That was simple enough. A lot of people dismiss Super Paper Mario for not really keeping up the RPG tradition in the spin-off series, but that is a small price to pay in order to experience this incredibly dark story. I don't know who exactly wrote it, but it's a hell of a tonal shift for Mario, made even more apparent when you've seen where the series has gone since. We could do with more of this. Sequels are the perfect opportunity to fuck with fans. You've already got them on your side thanks to the success of the first game, now you've got a great chance to screw around with the expectations of your audience. And really, what are sequels for if not for a bit of experimentation? Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time was so good and so groundbreaking that no direct sequel in the world would have been able to top it in the 2 years given to crank out another game. You have to take a different approach, and the angle that Majora's Mask took was nigh on perfect. These games inevitably have their comparisons, but the brilliant thing is that Majora's Mask has such a different feel to it that you don't even need to decide which one's better. You might be controlling the same protagonist and walking among a lot of the same NPCs, but Majora's Mask, as I'm sure you're aware, is a different beast entirely. Few mechanics have ramped up the pressure more than the 3-day time limit, where there's suddenly some real urgency about your quest. You can't afford to mess around for too long, since that moon is getting very big very quickly, and the price of failure is a dramatic showcase of just what happens when you don't follow through on your responsibilities. Majora's Mask is the story of the impending apocalypse and the 3 event-filled days that the people of Clocktown are destined to repeat until a small boy can fix this shit. You don't want this place to look like the future castle town from Ocarina of Time, do you? Somehow I can't imagine you as a re-dead. Humor is sometimes used to hide away something more serious. Used one way and it can mask some deeper problems, but used another way and it can disarm whoever's on the receiving end of it and leave them more vulnerable for when the serious stuff comes later. Mother 3, everybody! Yeah, I'm sure everyone saw this coming, but what makes Mother 3 different is how strongly the charm and humour contribute to the darker overtones that come on strong a little later. You could say that the events of Mother 3 were reasonably predictable given the nature of Earthbound, but even then, Mother 3 wastes no time laying the foundation for a devastatingly depressing adventure. Inside half an hour, you're mourning the brutal death of your mother, the disappearance and presumed death of your brother, and the subsequent decline of your father. And you still want me to laugh at these jokes and treat this like some kind of whimsical adventure? Alright then. What I think separates Mother 3 from Earthbound when looking at the game as a whole is how relentlessly dark Mother 3 is. Earthbound takes breaks to check out a tribe of big-nosed, slightly hairy creatures and a land full of dinosaurs, but it feels like around every turn in Mother 3 is something potentially upsetting. You've got a group of soldiers wearing pig masks who burn down forests and experiment on wildlife. Pokey Minch from the first game is an immortal time traveler who dooms himself to an eternity in complete isolation, and I haven't seen too many games with an ending as bleak as this. I know an official Mother 4 is the longest of long shots at this stage, but if I had any advice on how to approach another one of these games, it would be to tone it down a little. Not sure I could handle another game like this. Every game that I've talked about so far has had a child-friendly age rating attached to it. Pony Island pushes it a bit, but even the true nature of the game doesn't really warrant a mature rating or equivalent. The shock of the darker content becomes more apparent when it takes precedent over what the game seemed like from the outset. But could you achieve the same effect with a game marketed for older players? Would you be able to get the same kind of shock if the base game is less kid-friendly? Oh man, 1,000 times yes. Spec Ops: The Line is one of my favourite games that don't function brilliantly as games. Kinda reminds me of the Stanley Parable, where the game's narrative takes centre stage and the gameplay behind it does the bare minimum required to be a part of that genre. Spec Ops works well enough as a third-person shooter, but that's not likely to turn many heads, especially since all the publicity surrounding it made it seem like an ill-fated attempt to take on Call of Duty. To savagely deconstruct a genre and the nature of heroism in video games, that's what Spec Ops: The Line is for. It might seem like your cookie-cutter military shooter dipped in sand, but as the events of Spec Ops unfolds, what starts as a recon mission quickly deteriorates into a morally ambiguous journey of damage limitation. This isn't a game where the bad guys have feelings too. This is one where the bad guys either aren't bad guys or don't even exist. The only thing I heard about this game before playing it was the white phosphorus scene, which came and went without too many problems as Captain Walker starts to feel the metaphorical heat in Dubai. But no, this was a warm-up. When given the choice between working your way through hordes of enemy soldiers, or dumping something banned by the Geneva Convention on them, I take pride in the fact that I tried the former for the best part of 30 minutes of constant dying. In the end, in a direct parody of a popular and famous scene from Call of Duty Modern Warfare, you drench peacekeeping soldiers and civilians in white phosphorus and have to walk through the aftermath, taking in the sight of frazzled soldier and civilian alike. Yeah, I don't feel much like a hero. Thanks for asking. This has been RabbidLuigi, and I've heard it argued that Spec Ops for Line berates you pretty hard for choices that are out of your control, but on the flip side, there are a lot of games out there that praise you for making the right decision when there weren't any other decisions to be made. If you were in Captain Walker's position, you would find yourself between a rock and a hard place. In a lot of places, this doesn't feel like a third-person shooter. It's more like a horror game. Got a topic that you'd like me to discuss in the countdown? Leave a suggestion in a comment below and head over to my Twitter, where I'll be holding a vote to decide the subject of the next countdown based off the best of your submissions. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Hey guys, hope you like that. I was here last week talking about how many spoilers I put into the last couple of countdowns, and wouldn't you know it, I'm here again with another video full of them. Though the recent videos I've made have been pretty popular, so maybe these are the type of topics that you guys really enjoy. I don't know, but I'm thinking of doing a top 10 about annoying enemies next week, so if you got any suggestions for that, that'd be great. The more annoying, the more useful. Never said that before in my life.